Hey Jeff, I recently moved into the Void.
Yeah, I don't know why, but yeah.
I mean, it's kind of like the Burbs, but just less stuff. Anyway, I ordered a pizza like 6 weeks ago. Still not here.
Does it
Let
show who
me.
your delivery driver is?
Mobius.
Oh, yeah, that guy's not fucking coming.
Awesome.
Welcome in to the Bro 4 Squad podcast, where we are just a bunch of bros drinking beer and watching TV and movies. This is our review of Loki, episode 5, titled Journey into Mystery, and I am your host, the Mayor Jeff Hornacek, joined by the mad scientist Brian Banner to review this as we do all of our television episodes on the Bro 4 Squad criteria, which is the acting, the story, our favorite scene, and then theories or questions going forward. And for this episode, since it is the penultimate episode of the season of Loki, we're actually going to do some predictions for the finale, sort of in that segment as well. So, Banner, off the top, very fun cast of characters here. Some really unique takes on the whole concept of variants of Loki. Who stood out to you, positive or negative, in episode 5?
Positive. I'm gonna say Jack Veal as Kid Loki. Again, for years, the MCU has been just planting seed after seed after seed to do Young Avengers. And up until this point, I think they have done a fantastic job casting, and they didn't stop here. He just had that perfect amount of like cockiness and swag. Think he's one step ahead of you, but he's really not sure. You could tell he's just kind of going on the fly. I thought he did a great job, and I think he would be a great fit moving forward. So I'm really glad that we got to see him. He got to flex his muscles a little.
Before we move on to any other actors, so the only real significant credit he has on IMDb is a show, The End of the Fucking World. Was that one that you actually ended up watching on Netflix? I thought I remember you talking about it a long time ago.
Yeah, I did. There was 2, maybe 3 seasons of it. It was like a dark British comedy on Netflix.
Do you
Um,
remember him from it at all?
I don't remember him from it. He was not one of the main 2 or 3 characters.
Yeah, he
So
played
I'm
Little James in
so
about
I
6 episodes, it looks like.
so he was, yeah, man, damn, he looks completely different. He was the main kid's like as a child. That's
Mm.
fucking crazy. I had no idea.
Yeah, and I'd heard good things about the show. Is the only reason I asked.
Great show.
Um,
Definitely would recommend it to anybody out there.
and yeah, Jack Veal was awesome. Kid actors, we always talk, are very hard to cast successfully.
Has the MCU missed yet?
If they have, it's certainly not coming off the top of my head. Obviously, Richard E. Grant, I think, stole the episode as he's being
Yes.
credited as classic Loki, but he is just chewing the scenery and having a fucking blast. And I think enjoying this role even more because they put him in the ridiculous 1960s Loki costume. Of course, we get Owen Wilson's return as Mobius, which I think once we saw the end of episode 4, realizing that pruning was not a death sentence, we were hoping he would be back. But I gotta say, and I'll get into this and why this is even more important in theories and questions, but a performance this episode, Brian, that I actually thought was kind of weak was Gugu Mbatha Raw as Ravonna Renslayer. I did not feel her as the menacing character she's supposed to be.
I
Yeah,
agree.
and when she was having conversations with Sylvie, I felt like Sophia DiMartino was just acting circles around her and seemed way more into sort of the dynamic of those two characters and the weight and the gravitas that them finally having a face to face after all these years and all the motivation of Sylvie basically being spurned by their first encounter. I just felt like that was sort of a one-sided conversation that they had, and her character is important, although not in this episode much, but I just felt like she was not really up to the standard of the other actors.
Yeah, and I think part of that, and this is going to be my first knock on any directing of this season, but I think it may have been some of the directing, some of the writing, because I feel like Sylvie is so fueled by revenge, right? And obviously, Renslayer's world gets turned completely upside down. We think she's following these timekeepers that may or may not be timekeepers. They're androids. You have this person that's coming after you because they're so pissed at what you did and they got away. Like, she's kind of in this weird, like, limbo area. And it wasn't like, do you play it cool and suave, like I'm still in control, or do I play it like freaked out? And I think that she got those two emotions mixed up, and it just did not come out good on screen.
And I know it's hard, but we need to feel in that scene that Ravonna Renslayer is someone who could somehow get the upper hand in a conversation with a Loki who literally spend their entire lives trying to deceive people. And really never once
Didn't
did I
feel
feel
it.
like, no, I did
Didn't
not feel
feel
like
it.
this is an intellectual equal. Because now every time I see Renslayer, and especially now that her whole plan and her cover has kind of blown up in her face, I think, well, the only reason you ever got the jump on Kid Loki, and it wasn't even for very long, was because she was like 8 and didn't know what was happening. Because the second Kid Loki got to the TVA, she's...
I just want to know how she climbed the political ladder to be the head judge from, Hunter Investigator.
They say it's not about what you know, it's about who you know.
She obviously didn't know the timekeepers.
Maybe she has an uncle at the TVA who, is like a board member or something. All right, anything else? You want to move on to story?
Let's move on to story.
IMDb describes the plot for episode 5 as Loki tries to escape the void, a desolate purgatory where he meets variant versions of himself. And Banner, watching this episode, I had to think the high level pitch, like right off the bat, Kevin Feige says, "Hey, you have 20 minutes. Sell me on why we should do a Loki show." This episode, I think, conceptually, is the pitch you give to Marvel Studios, 100%.
Right? 100%.
Yeah.
This episode literally had everything. It had comedy. It had actions. Gave me all the feelies. It moved the story so far forward in such a great way and set up what I'm expecting to be a great finale. They doubled down on our Loki, or current time Loki, as far as coming to terms with himself and basically how much Loki sucks. And I think you see Sylvie and old Loki, they kind of embody that as well. And you see them in a not as big of a way, but you definitely see them kind of come to terms with that as well.
I think, and I don't want to like jump the shark here with best scene at all, but the premise of all these different Lokis that have had all these different life experiences, but it's kind of led them to the same place is such a cool idea for an episode.
100%.
And
you could almost just do like an anthology show. Give me 10 of those Lokis, each one you get one episode. I'd watch shit out of that.
100%. And the concept of the void is really interesting to me. It exists at the end of space-time. So it's really just like where they take all the timelines that need to be pruned. And I think of it as like a trash can at the end of the hallway. They crumple up the part they don't want and they just toss it in the trash can.
Yep.
And so it's insignificant. It's just sort of a fucking mess.
Which I don't want to brag, but I kind of predicted this a little bit on one of our past shows.
Yeah, I think the way you describe this is...
It was similar. It wasn't, I don't think it was the exact same, but I was on the right track. Brainstorming. I'm an ideas man. You guys figure it out.
That's why you're a scientist, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think the interesting part of the story, too, is when Sylvie is kind of asking Renslayer. And again, Renslayer is sort of the unreliable narrator. We don't know if we can really believe anything she's saying in the conversation with Sylvie. But she basically says, well, what could possibly create a nexus? Or maybe it's actually the Loki's talking. He says, yeah, it is. It's Hiddleston who says, what could create a nexus level event here? I think Kid Loki's like, nothing, dude. They don't give a shit about this world. Like,
that's why everything gets dumped there.
Right. So I thought the void was really cool. And then, like you said, I still have, I think, all of the same questions that I had after episode 4, but this progressed the plot in a way that I think it just added a lot of context to all the character motivations. And in the end, I think really the two main things that I want to see, and we'll get into this at the very end, are obviously who's in charge of the TVA and how that ties into Renslayer's plan. and then how they're going to end Hiddleston's Loki character in this show emotionally. And this, I think, took a really big step for the second of those two.
Yeah, I think that coming out of episode 4, we were like, loved everything about it. This is great. We got twists and turns everywhere. But there was that hesitation in me going, how are they going to tie all of this up? We've kind of got a lot of, not even threads, but like half threads out there. And we've got kind of, how are they going to get to the end of this? This episode said, hey, this is how we're going to get there. And we're there now. Really good job of just bottlenecking us right into the finale.
I think since the Lamentis episode, we've had 2 very, very strong episodes in terms of progressing the plot, which we said we wanted because that was kind of a treading water type feel narratively, and they've definitely picked up the pace since then. All right, are you ready for best scene?
I think so, maybe.
This is a tough one, man.
This is really hard.
I also have to say, just the aesthetic of the Void and visually how awesome it looked, I was really
absolutely incredible.
This series has a very dark and kind of muted color palette, but it's just really worked for me. Like Lamentis had a nice kind of like a neon feel to it.
Yeah.
Whereas the Void sort of feels, I mean, it has to feel desolate, and they convey that really well.
Yeah.
Favorite scene for you? Sorry.
I've got 3 wrote down, and I legitimately can't decide between the 3. I actually think I'm going to go with one of our end scenes, and that's when old Loki or classic Loki comes in and saves the day. Earlier, he was bragging about how he can make a, what is it called? It's called like projection. Projection. Yeah. He can make a projection so believable that Thor himself and Odin himself believed it. And now he made one so good that the Alligator can go after it. And him kind of coming in at the end of the day going, no, our job is to survive. I'm not going to do this. But then ultimately going in and making that kind of sacrifice for them, to me, shows that at the end of the day, like you said before, every Loki has different past experience, but they all end up at the same way. Whereas essentially our Loki made that sacrifice play. He became kind of that anti-hero later on in his, we call it MCU career, going in through Ragnarok and Endgame. So I think that it's just a really cool visually, and I felt like it meant a lot just for Loki as a character, but not just one, for all the Lokis, where they are literally all the same, and they need to be okay with that.
Yes, and I'll get to this now. My best scene sort of ties right into that, because it was all the Lokis hanging out and drinking together, talking about their lives and how they each got to where they're at. And Richard E. Grant's classic Loki sort of explains, it's actually kind of crazy in like a 40-minute episode, just meeting him, how much I gave a shit about him at the end.
I actually had this down because I knew you were going to take Grant, so I purposely took Veal here. But in my notes next to Grant, I said, he made me believe he was a Loki and changed by the end of a 40-minute episode where it took Hiddleston, nothing against Hiddleston, but it took him literally 5 years for me to feel those same things. And Grant did it in 40 minutes. And honestly, probably only close to like 20 of his actual screen time.
Because he has a lot of comedic dialogue too.
Yeah.
But one of my favorite parts of that scene where all the Lokis are talking is classic Loki explains, in Infinity War, instead of he made a projection that Thanos killed, and he used it as his excuse. Look, I've messed up my whole life. I'm just going to go into exile and think about this. And after decades and decades of sort of beating himself up emotionally, he says, all right, I want to leave this planet now and live my life anew. And when he tries to do that, the TVA says, oh, you're making a branch reality. I'm sorry, you have to go to the void. Fuck off. And that inherently is sort of the problem of all the Lokis, right? They constantly mess up. They constantly think selfishly. And then the one time they want to change, they're unable to, or something happens that prevents it from taking place. It's sort of like the curse. I think Loki has said several times in this series, are we cursed, when talking with other Loki variants, and you kind of get the sense that they are, really.
They might be.
Also, to your point, Banner, that scene with classic Loki and taking on Alligator, the projection of Asgard, I just thought was a really cool idea.
So cool. And it was like you said with visually, everything was real muted, and then all of a sudden when he did that, it became much more vibrant and real to what we have seen in the past. So really cool visually how they did that.
All right, anything else? We're ready to move on to theories and questions, and then our predictions or wants for the finale.
Let's move on.
All right, so the first thing I wanted to talk about, I have quite a bit here, but none of it is like too heavy. There's just a lot of.
Let's go through because I'm sure we'll have some overlap and just have good dialogue here.
All right, we'll do round robin. I'll start first. This is a question. So, young Loki or Kid Loki mentions in his backstory that his branch reality is that he killed Thor, and then he became a variant, which I thought was crazy that they said that. So I just want to know your opinion as a comic book fan and a fan of the MCU, sort of playing off of the idea of the Marvel what if in Kid Loki's reality with young Thor being dead. What do you think would happen in the MCU in Asgard? Like, that just seems like a crazy thing to have an old Loki do.
I can't even start to fathom. So you're saying if Thor was dead, Loki was still there, like they didn't prune the branch.
Right, like if Thor dies as a 9-year-old, like Loki kills him somehow, does Loki ascend to the throne of Asgard? I mean,
does he get Mjolnir?
Yeah, does he become worthy? Does Odin tell him he's a frost giant immediately, and there's like a frost giant civil war versus them? And
I don't have the brain capacity to even think about this right now.
Yeah, so all the other Lokis, like Kid Loki was the one, obviously, again, Loki's learned through their mistakes and their own emotional trauma. But he even is like, yeah, I fucked up. I killed Thor. Like, so his issue with becoming a variant in the branch reality he created was much different from classic Loki, who literally was just like trying to go live a peaceful life after he learned his lesson. It just shows you Loki is such a deep character that like all the different variations of it, that's why this show works conceptually.
This show conceptually would not work with any other character.
Oh yeah, completely. Because the depth and emotionality of Loki is incredible. I think that's why an actor as talented as Hiddleston has been so intrigued to come back to this character for a decade plus. Because there's always more meat on the bone, I feel like.
Always.
All right, what else you have?
So, so obviously Mobius is back at the TVA now. We know that. Okay. Mm-hmm. We know that Hunter 15 is she still at the TVA, or did she get...
I think she's still there, but she's like in jail. Lockup. Yeah.
Right. So are those two going to meet up and kill Renslayer, or what's going to happen at the TVA, assuming that Sylvie and Loki don't make it back, or prior to them making it back?
Well, if I'm Mobius, your plan has to be to get Hunter B-15 first. And then I think you need to just recruit as many agents as you can to the cause. But I did write down one of my theories is that Mobius will die at the end of this show.
Has to.
I think he'll be a martyr, and his sacrifice will be what can help eliminate the TVA. We've fallen in love with him because of Owen Wilson, and he's just a fun character and a great counterpoint to Loki in this series. But yeah, to what happens to him, he's got to work quickly, because I don't think, like in this finale, again, let's say the runtime is an hour, which is what I'm predicting. With some of the questions they're going to have to answer, and there's going to be a lot of depth that has to be added to whoever is behind the TVA. I don't think we can spend more than the first 20 minutes on Mobius's journey back.
I agree. Yeah. Unless they don't sum it up and they leave us on a cliffhanger going into maybe some other project.
Which they could do, for sure.
I don't know. I don't know if they will. But.
Would you prefer, because I think the other common prediction from fans for Mobius is that he ends up back in his timeline with either his memory wiped or not, and he's on a wave runner. Would you rather, or a jet ski? Would you rather he die sort of a hero, or would you rather he get that finale?
I would rather that they give him his life back, because he makes that comment right before they prune him that hey, if you can go anywhere in time, where would you go? I would just go back to where I was. And so it'd
Yeah.
be kind of cool if they gave that to him. I would like them to keep his memories, maybe, or understand and know about the TVA. So maybe they can come and draw on Owen Wilson again later. That's probably a little selfish on my part, but don't kill him off so that we can bring him back. Because I think he's kind of like a Coulson character. We all kind of started to fall in love with him and love him, and then they killed him. His death was extremely significant, and it's still proving significant even today with this show, even.
Yeah.
And then they had Agents of Shield where they brought him back, and that got all messy. I don't want that to happen again. I don't know that Owen Wilson would come back for something, but I'd like him to leave that on the table, and it actually makes sense.
Yeah, I'm sure he would for that. And again, I'm sure Marvel at this point, with every single actor they bring in, big or small, there is the prerequisite in their contractual obligation that there's the ability to come back at Marvel Studios' request. One thing, this isn't really much to talk about, just sort of an interesting aside that I knew you would appreciate. Maybe only you, actually, of the people that I know. Eliath, I thought, looked a lot like Galactus in Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer, except cooler.
Yeah, yeah, it really did.
Galactus is like a fart cloud, but Elias is kind of like a dragon cloud.
Yeah, it was more dragony. It had a little bit more dinosaur face to it.
Definitely.
I was kind of getting some Godzilla vibes, like Mecha Godzilla. Whenever he's in the new
Hmm.
one, when he's kind of coming out and you see all the smoke and the steam and shit coming out,
Yes.
I thought I was getting a little bit of mixture of that in there.
Um, One question I had, and this might tie into a theory or something you had. So at the end of the episode, we see basically that portal or a hole or something opens up in the void to take them to presumably where the TVA has basically been hiding out above or below, basically outside of space time, right? Outside of the timelines where they are independent. What do you think that area is? Is it, I was getting Latveria vibes, like is Doctor Doom somehow involved? Is it in the quantum realm because it sort of looks like Megalopolis, which Ant-Man has briefly walked by in Ant-Man and the Wasp when they rescue Janet? Is it something else? Do you have a theory at all on that?
I I want it to be Latvia. I think it would be awesome to introduce Doctor Doom prior to introducing the Fantastic Four. Um, because they're obviously big rivals there. I think that would be cool. I don't know how it would tie in of it being Latveria, because I mean,
Right.
obviously you can't have Doctor Doom like, oh, I control time. That's just fucking stupid. Um, so I don't think they'll go that way. Now I think the fact that Ant-Man walked past there, it's a real possibility. Um, and
Kang
that
is in the next Ant-Man movie, so a lot of the I'm not going to talk about Kang on this episode just because I beat it to death, and I still
yeah,
think he's in charge of the TVA. But that would be sort of an organic way to put him into the next movie.
100%. And like I said, I don't know that they're going how they end this show. I think I've said this fucking at the end of uh WandaVision and Falcon and Winter Soldier, but eventually they're gonna have to start like leaving us these breadcrumbs to pull off of to get us transition us back into the movies,
Right.
right? So far, we've got three shows that have been a direct reaction or the cause or their direct effect of something that happened in Endgame. Sam getting the shield, Wanda losing Vision, and then Loki taking the Tesseract. All of those were from Infinity War or Endgame, right? They have to lead
Yes.
us back into the cinema realm now. You have great opportunities here. You could do Multiverse of Madness. Obviously, this is going to start everything going fucking nuts. Um, or, like you said, we need something to get Ant-Man involved. And this, again, is a perfect. They're setting it up to where this could be that. And I don't. We don't. What? We don't have any other shows scheduled before we get another movie, right?
I don't. I mean, I think What If comes out in August, but that's not really relevant to.
Yeah, that's. I don't think that's going to be.
Yeah, it's. I think actually the entire point of it is it's like a. It's not in continuity with the MCU. It's like a fun.
Yeah.
Hey, like one of them, which we can talk about the soft pod, but Tony Stark gets trapped in the cave, and Eric Killmonger in the Marines comes and rescues him.
Yeah.
So he never becomes Iron Man. Is kind of the point. So yeah, that won't really affect this. And I think Hawkeye comes out after, like, No Way Home, and
yeah, I think so. I think you're right on that. I don't even know if they've started shooting that yet.
I've seen some photos, but they might be like just promotional stuff.
Okay.
All right, what else you got?
Man, that's pretty much all I got. I'm just so excited to see where this goes, where this ends up. I pretty much have, like you said, all the same questions. The only thing that needs to be answered, and this show's done a really good job of keeping us there, is what is the TVA? Who is the TVA? That has been the question literally from 2 to 5 minutes into the first episode, and that still hasn't been answered. We're going to get that payoff. At the end of the day, everything else doesn't really matter, and it's all just falling into place.
Yeah. They've done a good job with this show. We always talk about, like, if a show is so dependent on a specific reveal, it's very risky because it could be something polarizing where half the audiences don't like it and then retroactively be like, oh, well, that show fucking sucked. Even though, again, it should be about the journey, not the end. But I do think this show, as interested as I am in who's running the TVA, if it's not Kang, which is what I'm wanting it to be, but if it's not Kang, I think I'll still be happy because I feel like we got enough great added color to the character of Loki, and I think they'll end him at an interesting spot as well. The last thing that I had is, you had kind of speculated on this last week. I don't think Ravonna Renslayer is what we've been led to believe she is.
She's not the big baddie.
Correct. You speculated she could be a Loki. I'm sort of wondering, do you think there's a chance she's full of shit to Sylvie and knows exactly who the timekeepers really are, who's pulling the strings and is in charge of the TVA? Or do you think she's actually now like, I'm a nefarious person, but now the timekeepers are robots, I actually don't know who the fuck runs the show here?
I think she doesn't know what the fuck is going on. And the only reason I think that is because when you could tell, even before, like, it was revealed, that her and Miss Minutes were like, oh, hey, like, yeah, just tell her something. And it was so poorly done, where that was Renslayer, like you said earlier, trying to be an equal with Sylvie, and she couldn't do it. And that really doesn't help my theory of her being a Loki, but I think that means that, hey, she really doesn't know what's going on, but she wants to or needs to figure it out before Sylvie does.
Right. I'll kind of go the other way with my theory, just for the sake of argument. I think Renslayer is not the big bad, but I do think Marvel has not followed the comics directly with a lot of their adaptations, which has actually worked out really well. I think with Renslayer, she is actually going to be romantically involved with Kang, like in the comics, and she's basically like his right-hand woman who's been running the whole show. But she's sort of the face, middle management, and Kang is like the corporate guy that only swings by, like, for the company retreat every year.
Right. He's actually on the golf course playing 18 every day.
Right. He's schmoozing clients.
Yeah.
You think he's not working while he's out there? Come on.
Who's paying for the TVA? That's his job to figure out.
Right. Exactly. To get that money. I guess last thing, Brian, and we kind of talked about this a little bit. In the finale, is there anything that you need to see, or anything that need to see for the show to be, in your mind, a success or be very satisfying to you? Or I guess, is there anything within reason that you think could happen that you'd be like, oh man, that kind of ruins it for me? Don't say like Loki pooping his pants.
No, I honestly don't think there's anything they can do. Even if the finale is complete utter shit, I still think will think that this episode or this season was great, and that everything was great because they, like you said, they gave so much extra depth to the character of Loki. Not just Hiddleston's Loki, but Loki as a concept, as an idea. We learned so much more. I think, and I hate to do this, but when you go back and compare it to WandaVision, probably similar run times when you add everything together. WandaVision were shorter episodes, but we got more of them. They had so many, like, crazy, weird things going on, red herrings, things that we needed to figure out, didn't figure out, and they just kind of shit in our face. I know that some of the publicity stuff didn't help that, where They've obviously got that under control by Loki. But then that show was very dependent on a payoff, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think this show is as dependent on a payoff because there aren't so many questions we need answered. What else do we need answered other than who is running the TVA?
Right.
Very simple. It's very simple. So I guess the answer to your question is they don't tell us who's running the TVA.
Which I think there's a 0% chance.
There is a 0% chance of that happening. So I hope I'm not eating my words next week.
And I think one thing that this show has done that's been really interesting is introduce the concept of the multiverse and multiple realities, which we know in both No Way Home and Multiverse of Madness, and maybe even Quantumania, Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, is going to be a big factor in the story. There are some people out there that say, well, you need to explain the multiverse here. Like, I think that might be better suited for some of for some of the bigger movies. I agree. We've got a little taste here, a little appetizer. But with one episode left, if you ask me, did I want you to devote more time to that? Or who's in charge of the TVA and sort of Loki's resolution? I would say we get the multiverse. We really, I think, got a little tease here. We're good. Focus on the other stuff.
This gave us a great foundation of what the multiverse is, right? We know there are multiple timelines all cohesively working together. This is all what's supposed to happen in each individual timeline. Then we see all these different Lokis in all different outfits and just different mindsets and everything going, this right here is proof of all these different Lokis. What more do you need to explain the multiverse?
Mm-hmm. You really
I don't need more than that. You can dig deeper in these other movies that we know are going to be directly affected by something with the multiverse.
I think the only thing that could happen in this finale that would make me a little bit disappointed would be if Hiddleston's Loki dies and then they show us that he once again somehow came back to life.
Yeah, that'd be a little... I mean, Lokis do survive, but would you be upset if, this just came to me, they kill Hiddleston, but one of the other Lokis, whether it's... I'm going to leave Kid Loki out of this one, because I think he can be put in a separate box by himself because of Young Avengers. But let's say Sylvie now is Loki, and she shows up in future movies.
That'd be awesome. I think that'd be awesome.
Hiddleston is done in the MCU, dead. But we still have the character of Loki moving on.
I think that'd be fucking sick.
I think that would be amazing.
Did Richard E. Grant's Loki die? Maybe not. We don't know. I'd love to see.
What happens when Alioth eats something or like absorbs something?
Or, who's to say if the TVA is somehow destroyed and that's what unleashes Kang on Earth to fight, to battle the Avengers? Does that, destroy Alioth and somehow free everyone he's eaten? I don't know. That's a little too much for me to bring up at the very end of the show. It's a bit too heavy.
At the end of the day, to answer your question, we have to remember, and this is the same thing we had to remember with Civil War. The show is called Loki. It's not called Loki and the multiverse or learning. It has nothing to do with the multiverse. This show is all about Loki. Whereas, just like Civil War, that was the Civil War event told from the eyes of Captain America.
Right.
And I think we have to keep those goggles on in this scenario as well.
Mm-hmm. Especially because this concept can be taken so many different ways, and I think it will be. People can't act like this is the last time we're going to hear about the multiverse. Well, they should have explained it more. Like, dude, there's at least 3 projects coming up that have... One of them literally has multiverse in the title. Yeah. We know No Way Home is going to explore it. And if Kang is the villain here, we already know he's in the Ant-Man sequel, so I'd be shocked if there was not some overlap there as well. So I think we're pretty much covered. All right, anything before we let the people go, Brian, for the second to last time reviewing Loki?
No, I think that this again proves that Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios just know what the fuck they're doing. And they're literally all they're doing is taking Stan Lee's blueprint for what he did with comics and how he grew them over the decades and applying it to cinema. And they're doing it to perfection. We have movies and TV shows that are all intermingling great together, and they haven't been any bad properties. as far as the TV shows go.
Yeah.
Even if you count Agent Carter and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. in this, they were still great, whether they belong in canon or whatever. They were still great, and they started with Marvel Studios.
Yeah, I think there's just a consistency that you know you're going to get from a Marvel property, which is rare to find these days.
Even the worst Marvel property, which is Thor: The Dark World.
Well, you know what I think it is.
I know, but you're wrong.
This has made actually Thor: The Dark World better, in my opinion.
Oh, 100% it has. Thor: The Dark World, it's like a fine wine. It is aged really well because of how much significance it had in literally the rest of the
Endgame made it more important, you know?
Yes, it does. It doesn't make it a better movie, but it means the story is more important and is better.
Yeah.
It was just a poorly made movie. That's my biggest problem with it.
Had some cool concepts, but yeah, overall, didn't work out. All right, for the mad scientist Brian Banner, I'm the mayor, Jeff Hornacek. We'll see you guys after episode 5, the final one, at least of this season. Excuse me, episode 6, thank you, of Loki. I know they've sort of hinted at a second season, quote unquote, but based on the framing device here, I just don't know how that would work at all. We'll see, though. Again, I'm really curious to see how this ends.
Unless it's not Hiddleston and they follow like Kid Loki or Sylvie or even President Loki. I'd be okay with that.
I'd be totally cool with that. Yeah.
Him running for office.
They should just do like his campaign ads on TV randomly. All right, we're the Bro Force Squad, guys. Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. If you type in Bro Force Squad as 3 separate words, you'll find us there. Follow us on Twitter at Bro Force Squad. We're also on letterboxd.com. Again, that's Bro Force Squad, 3 words, to check out all of our movie reviews. And check out everything that we do and post on our website, broforcesquad.com. Till next time, Brian and I have to cast our absentee ballots for Loki. It's like his foreign policy.
It's great.
So I'll just murder everyone else, but I'm just interested to see if he'll do it.
Yeah.